The scream split the quiet Saturday morning like glass shattering on concrete. Neighbors spilled out of their homes, coffee mugs forgotten, phones clutched tight in disbelief, as the sight seared itself into everyone's memory. There was Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, red-faced and puffing with arrogance, swinging her meaty fist at my grandmother, who stumbled back, her silver hair gleaming under the sun. For a second, the world froze. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the street. The frail frame of an 80-year-old woman against the brute swing of a woman who believed rules and fear were her crown. How could anyone forget that sight? My chest locked with fury, but before I could even move, Grandma steadied herself, jaw set, eyes sharp as steel. It was the look of a woman who had worn a badge for 30 years, a woman who had walked alleys darker than Karen's soul and cuffed men twice her size. Karen thought she had chosen an easy target. She couldn't have been more wrong. The day had started so normal. We were cleaning the porch, laughing as Grandma told me stories of her old police patrol days, how she used to walk a beat in a city that never slept. Then Karen stormed over, her usual strut of authority dripping with venom. She waved a paper in my face, screeching about unauthorized decorations on my porch to hanging plants Grandma had given me for my birthday. These violate HOA guidelines, she spat, as though she were a judge handing down a sentence. I rolled my eyes and tried to ignore her, but she shoved the paper closer until it brushed my cheek. That's when Grandma stepped forward, her voice calm but edged with steel. Back it up, lady. You don't talk to my family like that. The crowd that had gathered expected Karen to hurl insults. Instead, she snapped. Her arms swung wild and crude, slamming into Grandma's shoulder. Gasps erupted. Someone screamed, "Call 911." And yet, Karen stood smirking, chest heaving with that sick satisfaction of a bully who thought she'd won. But my grandmother straightened, brushed the dirt from her cardigan, and then the air shifted. Her stance changed. Her voice carried the weight of decades of authority. "You just assaulted a retired officer of the law," she declared, her voice booming across the cul-de-sac. "And I'm placing you under citizen's arrest until the deputies arrive." Karen blinked, suddenly unsure, the color draining from her cheeks as the crowd buzzed with disbelief. What nobody in the neighborhood knew until that moment was that my grandmother hadn't just been any cop. She had been a decorated officer, a detective who had stared down mobsters, walked out of ambushes, and taught half the county's current police force how to handle a takedown. She reached into her purse, pulled out her retired badge, and held it high, gleaming in the sun. Gasps turned into cheers. Phones shot up, recording every second. Karen sputtered, pointing her finger. "You can't do this. I'm the HOA president." But the words sounded ridiculous now, hollow compared to the golden weight of that badge. And then came the twist nobody expected. From the back of the crowd, a voice rang out. Officer Daniels, a uniformed patrol cop who had responded to countless HOA calls, stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said, his eyes fixed on my grandma. "Is this the same Karen who's been filing dozens of false reports every month?" My grandmother gave a curt nod. Daniels looked at Karen like she was a bug under his boot. "Well then," he said, pulling out his radio, "today's the day it all comes crashing down." Karen's face twisted. She lunged forward, trying to snatch my grandma's badge, but two neighbors stepped in, blocking her path. By the time the sheriff's deputies arrived, Karen was shrieking like a banshee, mascara streaking down her cheeks, veins popping in her neck. My grandma, steady as a mountain, calmly recited the assault, the witnesses, the badge, the law. Deputies cuffed Karen right there in front of everyone, her shrill protest drowned out by applause. But the story didn't end there. Because in the police car, through the open window, Karen screamed a confession she didn't mean to reveal. "This neighborhood belongs to me. I've been covering for half the board's fraud for years. You'll never take us down." Every phone in the crowd captured it, every word etched into digital proof. That was the twist that turned a neighborhood scuffle into a full-blown scandal. By the next morning, the video had gone viral, the headline blaring across screens. HOA president arrested for assaulting retired cop confesses to fraud on camera. Grandma didn't just win that fight. She exposed years of corruption buried beneath HOA paperwork. The district attorney announced a full investigation. Board members resigned in shame. And as for Karen, She faced charges that went far beyond assault: fraud, extortion, falsification of documents. Her reign of fear collapsed in a single punch, and it wasn't the one she threw. Would you call it justice, fate, or poetic payback that the woman who thought she owned the neighborhood ended up in a mugshot, while my grandmother, standing tall at 80, became the face of resilience? The days that followed felt like living inside a courtroom drama brought to life. Neighbors whispered in small circles, eyes darting at every patrol car that rolled through the cul-de-sac, every news van parked at the corner with cameras aimed at our once sleepy street. Karen had gone from barking out HOA fines to appearing in a bright orange jumpsuit, shackled wrists clinking as deputies escorted her into the county courthouse. The sight alone was enough to send a ripple of relief through every family she had bullied. Grandma, though, remained calm and composed. She attended every hearing, cane tapping lightly on the tiled floor, her presence radiating dignity and unshaken strength. People started calling her Sergeant again, a nickname she hadn't heard since retirement. And while she always brushed off the praise with a modest smile, I could see in her eyes that it meant something. She wasn't just defending herself that day, she was defending an entire community that had been silenced for too long. The prosecution wasted no time. Video evidence of the assault was clear, recorded from multiple angles. Witness testimonies stacked higher than the courthouse ceiling. But the real hammer came when investigators dug into HOA records. As it turned out, Karen's punch wasn't the only crime staining her reign. Hidden beneath the HOA's neat reports were years of financial mismanagement, missing dues, and secret payments funneled into accounts linked to her and a select few board members. Fraud, extortion, and even threats documented in shaky late-night emails from residents who had been too afraid to speak out until now all of it spilled into the light. Karen's defense attorney tried to paint her as misunderstood, a woman stressed by the burdens of community leadership. The courtroom snickered. The judge himself nearly scoffed aloud before regaining composure. And when Karen took the stand, her arrogance finally betrayed her. Instead of apologizing, she ranted. She screamed about how people didn't respect authority, how she sacrificed her life to keep the neighborhood in order. But when she sneered at my grandmother, spitting out the words, "That old lady is nothing but a relic who should have stayed out of it," the jury's faces hardened like stone. You could practically hear the gavel drop before the judge even spoke. But then came the twist none of us expected. Mid-trial, a man stood up in the gallery. His hair was thin, his suit dated, but his voice cut sharp. "I was on the HOA board 5 years ago," he declared, trembling but resolute. "Karen forced me out when I refused to sign off on inflated contracts. She threatened my family. I left town in shame, but I couldn't stay silent anymore." Gasps filled the room. The judge allowed his testimony, and it opened a floodgate. Within hours, 3 more former board members came forward, their statements painting a picture of an iron-fisted tyrant who used lies, intimidation, and even physical threats to cling to power. The courtroom turned electric. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras flashed like lightning. And in the eye of the storm sat Grandma, serene, hands folded, her badge resting in her lap. She had seen criminals unravel before, and she knew exactly how this one would end. The verdict came swift and brutal. Guilty on all counts: assault, fraud, embezzlement, extortion. The judge's voice thundered through the chamber as he handed down the sentence. 10 years in state prison, restitution to the residents, and a permanent ban from holding any community or leadership role. Karen collapsed in her chair, her bravado finally shattered, tears streaming down her bloated cheeks as deputies dragged her away. The neighborhood that once cowered at her demands now erupted in applause. But the real moment of transformation came weeks later. Without Karen's chokehold, the HOA was dissolved, and a new community council formed, not one rooted in fines and fear, but in volunteerism and shared trust. Families who once hid behind curtains during Karen's patrols now gathered openly for cookouts. Gardens bloomed where fines had once been threatened. Children chalked sidewalks with laughter instead of worry. It felt as if the very air of the neighborhood had changed, lighter, freer, alive again. Grandma was offered the honorary role of community liaison, but she declined with a smile. "I've had my years wearing a badge," she said. "This isn't about me. It's about all of you taking back your voice." Still, every meeting began with a chair reserved for her at the front, and she never once sat alone. I'll never forget the way she looked the night of the celebration. String lights hung between porches, tables filled with home-cooked dishes, neighbors hugging and laughing like they hadn't in years. Grandma stood on the small stage someone had built from spare lumber, her cane in one hand, microphone in the other. Her voice was steady, proud. Don't ever let anyone convince you they hold more power than your truth. Stand together, and no bully, no matter how loud or cruel, can break you. Her words echoed into the night, and for the first time in a long time, I felt what it meant to live in a true community, one bound not by rules scrawled in HOA handbooks, but by resilience, courage, and shared humanity. Karen thought her fist would silence my grandmother. Instead, it opened a door that no one can ever shut again. And so I ask you, do you believe justice was served? Or do you think Karen got off too easy for the pain she caused?